your time. So thank you for everyone coming in today to the launch of the A Learner's Toolkit program. This sort of points to the last 4 years of work here at Churchie, and what we're trying to do with the A Learner's Toolkit program is provide an open access portal, I guess, into the latest research in relation to the translation of the cognitive sciences, whether that be the science of learning or cognitive psychology or cognitive science. They all get often spoken about interchangeably. But what we're hoping to do is to provide a program for schools that is designed by teachers to share the best aspects of their translation of the cognitive science into their classrooms. Also, what we're trying to do as well is the reason why we're making it open access and no fee is that we believe here at Churchie that we are in a very fortunate position to do the work that we do here, and that it is sort of our responsibility to share what we find with any school anywhere in relation to what we're finding, and hopefully we can create a community of colleagues that's not bound by traditional school structures, where we can actually share across context, school type, location, geography, and context. And by doing that, we actually can push forward the profession and also remove the barriers of access that we do find in this field at times, where the most fortunate and the most able seem to have access to the best people. Also today, we'll give you a brief introduction of where we're at and what we've done. We'll then show you the website, which is live. And then most importantly, we'll sort of talk about the 3 ways in which schools can and teachers can participate within what we want to do today. So we'll get started, and what we really need to look at and focus on is that we've been working in this space, Vicky and myself and other key people here at Churchie, for the last 4 years. And we're at that point where we think that we have done a satisfactory job to this point. But for us to learn and be better, we're at that point where we want to collaborate with other school leaders, schools and teachers, because we really feel that by actually putting these ideas out, but also creating that community, will actually improve what we're looking at moving forward. So to give you an idea of where we started, so why has a school like Churchie focused on study? And really what happened was back in 2017, 2018, with the school and all of Queensland moving from traditional or old OP system, which has been around for quite some time. I have an OP. I won't tell you what it is, but it's not a very good OP. But in relation to the old OP system, which was basically school-based assessment, designed and moderated, and we had a really short focus on learning, where basically we had a very short-term view of the term in relation to it. But then we switched to the new QCE and the IB diploma here. And what we started to notice really quickly with that first group of students, in particular with the IB diploma, is that once they hit the second part of their year 11 journey, the wheels started to come off, because a lot of the strategies and practices and habits that had actually sustained them to that particular point in time were often focused on the short-term view of learning. And what we found was that at this point, a lot of these strategies were starting to come undone because of the nature of the changing in assessment, focusing on a much longer term view. And so what we're looking at is this idea that we're in relation, sorry, I just had a bit of distraction. The idea was that we needed to change it. And we made a lot of mistakes. And in today's presentation, we'll actually talk to you about our initial failures. And the reason why we're saying this is that we are seeing schools who are in a similar boat to us doing often the same failures. And what we found was that changing student study habits and strategies is much harder than we first thought. We've been in this space for quite some time, and we're still having difficulty actually taking all of our students on the journey. Now, what's interesting is different students at different points will change. But what we need to understand more is Why are they changing? What are the factors that contribute or cause or prompt a student to change? And how do we support them through the change process? But we started doing little satellite one-off sessions where we exposed the benefits and the virtues of the science of learning. We often focused on the knowledge about and the knowledge why strategies didn't work. But besides of these really, these one-off focused sessions, the truth is that if we keep working on this process, we had very little change in any form of behavior. What we noticed was that often the gap between the theory of the cognitive sciences, which often has its origins in the lab, which are highly controlled settings, to the nuanced translation to the classroom and to individual students, was that gap is too great for many of our students and teachers to make. And what we found was also really interesting. It was the behavior, not the ability of the student, that appeared to be a key contributor to the uptake or not of the targeted strategies. We also found that sometimes our really able students were just as resistant as our low-performing students, because often they didn't feel the need that they had to change their strategies or their processes because there wasn't the need to change. And we found that the students that had the more what we call favorable learning behaviors, and we'll talk a bit about that a bit later, but that they were more intrinsically motivated, that they had higher self-efficacy, higher self-determination. Those were the students that were more likely to change. So from that, as a school, we decided to change it up. And here gives you a good idea of our journey. So we started this ad hoc program in 2018, and we basically failed. From that failure, we decided that we needed to package the cognitive science knowledge and theory and practice and exemplars in a much more student-friendly platform, which is why we use the Toolkit. So the whole idea of the Toolkit is that it's a very much of a work person type approach, where it's the whole idea is that you pick the right tool, aka the right strategy for the right job. We also, in 2019, started to refine our conceptual model, and you'll see that a little bit later, and actually understanding what are the outside factors and the internal factors of the individual that moderate the ability for a student to change and for them to sustain through the change. Then in 2020, the school decided that we would put a pilot cohort of the Learner's Toolkit in the timetable. And when we show you one of our research outputs, it talks about their journey through their schooling and exposure to the Learner's Toolkit program. We also started to develop a continuum, which then is now in place in 2021, where we actually have a full program from years 7 to 10 built within the timetable, and you'll see our continuum. And the continuum is really focused on building students through a continuum of training. And the training is really important because the training is what we're finding has the greatest impact, not the science itself, but the actual mechanisms that we use in training, in applying the strategies into the immediate curriculum context, whether it be assessment, whether it be subject-based. And those are the things that we're finding has the greatest impact. In 2021, we had our program running, and we started to do a longitudinal analysis of impact. And from that, we were able to actually get an article published in which we piloted with another school in Brisbane in the Review of Education. Since then, we've decided to keep going, and we've built our open access website, which we'll see soon, but also developing a school research portal. And the last thing that we're focusing on at the moment is actually unpacking the link between student-learner behaviours, their habits, and the nature of the study strategies that they use, and then also their performance. So here's our toolkit. Now, we have not come up with any strategies in this toolkit. What we've gone is we've reviewed the literature, and what from that, we've come to these 6 strategies. And the reason why they're packaged like read it, retrieve it, space it, and jumble it is we found that the language early on of the cognitive sciences was a massive impediment for both students and teachers and parents in the ability to access and deploy these strategies over time. This is our conceptual framework. Now, the conceptual framework is all about what the individual brings to the table, the learning behaviors that they have and their context, because we have found over time that there are sweet spots for students to be engaged in study strategy training. We found with our older students that they're very resistant, or their learning behaviors are what we call crystalline. They're very resistant to change. And that we need to understand that as students head towards the end of their schooling and the stakes in terms of their results becomes higher and higher, they actually become more and more resistant to change. But what's interesting for most schools, we see a lot of effort put in years 11 and 12, whether it be bringing in external people or trying study programs or so forth. And what we're finding, and what we found early on with our students, is by this time, a lot of students have made a decision on what good study looks like for them, what has worked for them in the past, and therefore they're going to stick with the things that have worked for them. The issue is that often those strategies are not going to support them, and therefore that's why we see difficulty. Then we look at how this conceptual framework affects achievement, and then how achievement actually mediates and then comes back in terms of this cycle over time. And what's the difference, I guess, what we're looking at here is we're looking at the Learner's Toolkit being a preparatory program. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive, trying to equip students through the learning journey and look at them actually being prepared for both achievement and success, both at the school layer, but also in terms of longer term or lifelong learning, whether that be university, TAFE, or the workplace. And so here's our continuum, and this has changed quite a lot over the journey. So early on, our little guys in year 7, they start off in the year and they do units 1 and 2, which is called Fighting, Forgetting, and Building Understanding. And what that sort of signifies is the necessary strategies that our students need to employ to fight forgetting. And what we find is in the latter stages, forgetting and not being able to retrieve information from the past readily and efficiently is a major barrier to learning. But then we get from that into building understanding. And then in year 8, they focus on starting to build good habits. Then we touch into the work of Robert and Elizabeth Bjork with desirable difficulties. And this is where we are at the moment, is that just by setting study and just by training students in study, what's really interesting is that because they do this away from us and away from advice and instruction, actually pitching their study and what they do and how they do it and when they do it and why they do it is actually a really significant challenge that adolescents face and is a key motivator for our program, because if they are actually greater in charge, and that's where their self-efficacy comes in, they're more likely to pitch study at the right layers for them. And then we move on to sort of that self-regulation of tracking and owning their learning. Then we tap into Me and My Future, which is at the start of year 10 with the set planning process. And then at the end of it, we call it Drive the Bus. And Drive the Bus is basically at the latter stages of year 10, pushing them in prior to their senior transition, where we actually say to them, look, we've spent all this time and effort training you, teaching you strategies, helping you develop good habits and planning and tracking and owning your own learning. And you have an idea of where you want to go with your future learning, whether it be university, TAFE, or the workplace. Now it's up to you, for you to drive the bus, for you not to be a passenger at the end of the bus, but for you to be in the driver's seat. And that's a process of 6 months that we spend with our year 10s and equipping them and allowing them the space to sometimes fail, to actually identify and to control what they do within their study timetable periods. And this is a real challenge, because at this point, we basically start to, the supports are still there, but the students are in that driving position. And one of the big things that we've worked on, and one of our critical friends, which we'll touch on when we go to the website, is Mark McDaniels, who is at George Washington University in St. Louis. And the reason why we were working with Mark at the moment is his training framework. It's called Knowledge, Beliefs, Commitment, and Planning. And what we've done is, the reason why we've adopted this is because early on, the knowledge about and the knowledge why certain strategies work just wasn't cutting the mustard for our guys. So therefore, we looked at how do we train our students in a similar way to how they train in football or train in terms of a musical instrument or train in the workplace. And what this is all about is actually shaping how we actually translate the cognitive sciences into the classroom. And this is probably where we sort of start to talk about the outcomes and the impact. Now, this is in 2 schools. It's not a perfect study by any stretch of the imagination, but this is an open access article which was supported by the University of Queensland in relation to looking at a preparatory program. And what we found was that often it was when we started to translate and embed the strategies into their immediate assessment and curricula. And what we did find, though, was really interesting, is that no matter how much training we did and no matter how good sort of the learning experiences were, we did find that there was a group of students with, we call it the low utility triad of cramming, rereading, and rewriting. And what was interesting, there was a group of students who started with this low utility triad. And what was interesting is that there was an attachment or a relationship, a fairly strong relationship between them and their beliefs themselves as learners in terms of their self-efficacy, their motivation, and their control of learning beliefs. Interesting, what we found was, in terms of the analysis, we found that those boys who, now they might not have been the most able and might not have started in the world's greatest position in terms of achievement, but those who actually improved their grade point average or their results, and we often looked at the core subjects such as maths, science, languages, and humanities. But even humanities is interesting because it's sort of like how the nature of the subject, whether it was geography or history. We have started to look at other subjects, but that's always difficult because it depends on what subjects they're studying at what point in time. But we did notice that as the students' GPA improved, now this is unclear to us at the moment. What we noticed was that there was an increase in the number and the utility, the value of the study strategies. There was a correlation there, and also in relation to a higher assessment of their self-efficacy, their control of learning beliefs. But what was interesting is there was a reduction in their anxiety around tests over time and the fear of failure. And that's something that we need to delve into a little bit further. So as we hit the middle part of today's session, what we're going to do is talk about what we've done with the website. Now, the website comes from some seed funding from the Independent Schools Association of Queensland that provided to Churchy. So we're very thankful to ISQ for that funding. And what we've done through the support of the school executive here at Churchy is we've built a website. Now, this website will basically have every aspect of our program freely available to any teacher, any school, any student, and any parent at any time. Also, what we want to do with the program and the website is create a research portal in which schools can actually take and use any of our research methods, our surveys, and our metrics, including our training continuum and so forth. But then what we want to do within that platform is to have the opportunity for schools to share and contribute to the wider population of schools who are interested in this space. And that is where we're not interested in terms of your student data. We don't want any of your student data. Your student data is your own. But if you might be working and let's say that your school's interested at looking at what we've done here and you might replicate that, the whole idea was that we would share and coach you through those processes for you to engage in your own action-based research in your school. But from that, there would be the ability to work on co-authored publications, whether it be journal articles, whether it be publications for your school or professional magazines or professional association conferences or articles. And the whole idea by that is that feedback, and we actually have a critical mass of schools who are critically engaged in this space, but are not restricted by any sort of financial obligations or the like. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to share with you, I'll stop sharing and I'm going to share with you the website. So the website is now live. Okay, so this is the website. So I'll just move my little thing out the road. Okay, so with the website, it's learnerstoolkit.com.au. With this website, what we've tried to do is we've created a base of the most I guess, the simplistic material to get people started. We've devised the program for both schools, students, and parents. Also, we have the ability in here, we have a blogging feature in relation to our news in terms of updates and additional journal articles that we're looking at in the works at the moment. But basically this site here is everything that we've done over the last 4 years. What we have here is the opportunity to share what we've done, but also to sort of share. We have two critical friends, Dr. Tom Perry at the University of Warwick, who did the Education Endowment Foundation's review of cognitive sciences in the classroom. What Tom is interested in is actually the translation, how schools translate the cognitive sciences, which I said at the start often comes in the very controlled settings of labs and so forth in the schools of psychology and the like. But how do you take something from a very controlled setting and you apply it within the nuances of a classroom in which there's so much going on and there are so many variables at play? How do schools actually do this properly? And then we have Professor Mark McDaniel, who obviously is interested in, because we're deploying and trialing and refining his knowledge, beliefs, commitment, and planning framework. On this site, we have access to all of our news, what we're learning on the way through, the ability for schools to sign up, and we'll talk a little bit that later. We have our program. We talk about how it was developed, why it was developed. Also, we have our results in relation to what we're finding at the moment. Also, we have access to the key elements of our study, what we worked at different times to sort of give schools an idea. And we actually have some testimonies from some external academics, some teachers, and some of our students. For schools, we start to talk about the elements of the program and what we're trying to achieve here, what we have for our school partners. And what we're looking at here from a school partnership perspective is the ability for schools to engage and for teachers to engage in whatever way suits them. And we'll finish up with that soon. Also, we have information for students. We talk about our strategies. All of our material is there in terms of the fact sheets, that base knowledge and understanding. We start talking about habits and the student learning experience. We have some material for parents, and there's a lot to do in this space because they're the third pillar that we're starting to see as a really critical factor. And then obviously news about the Churchill Research Centre and how you can get in contact with Vicky and myself. So as we come to the end of today's webinar, what I'm going to do is talk to you about what we're looking at doing for schools to work. So what we're developing at the moment, like I said earlier on, is our research area. So the research area is where we are basically going to share all elements of our program with schools and teachers who are interested. But for some people, all they want to do is discover, and so they might just engage with our website in using the free resources and materials that we have on this front-facing website. Also, we're looking at running termly teach meets where we'll put out a simple hour-long teach meet after school, where we'll hopefully push out and get teachers from all sorts of different schools from all around Australia who are interested in saying, well, this is how I've applied the cognitive science in my Year 7 English class through to my Year 12 chemistry class or literature class or ancient history class. And the whole idea there is that by seeing tangible examples that we can create the ability to share, connect people together. So that's discover. Level 2 is where, let's say, a school or a teacher wants to join and become a research partner. And we have an expression of interest form, which can be accessed down the bottom of this page. And this is what we're calling engage. So engage is where you might wanting to dip your toe into the water of engagement with the science of learning. And you might just look at what we've done, look at and translate simple things that you might find that's suitable for you, your subject, your context, your students, and just to take and utilize and engage with your normal everyday practice. We'll also give those people access to our research tools and our metrics. And if they want to do their own research in their own contexts of action-based research, or they might be doing some further learning at university, maybe they're doing a master's and they get the option to do their own sort of student project, or they want to do their own action research of their own classroom, they can go and use that to their heart's content. But with those people, they might want to contribute to the teach meets, and they might want to share what they're finding within the research space. And then we have level 3. So level 3 is probably what we're interested in doing, because what we're looking at doing is saying, okay, so you're going to build on the level 1 engage, but this is where we start to see some cross-school collaboration. This is where we start to move beyond the barriers that exist between schools, whether they be contextual, geography, school type, or whatever. And I think with COVID, what we've seen is that there is the ability to collaborate across distance and location and context quite easily now. And what we're looking at here is saying, hey, this is where schools might choose to feed back. So they might say, for example, one of the things we're really interested in doing is no one has ever really done a proper cross-sectional, cross-study assessment of the innate study strategies of their students. Even though when you look at it from a literature point of view, there's heaps of stuff in universities and in the tertiary setting in this space, but schools are a bit of a vacuum at the moment. And so what we're interested in is you might be at your school and you might want to go, well, what are the study strategies that my students are using at the moment? This would give you the opportunity to do a stock take of that, but also to dig a bit deeper. And this is what we're interested in working with other schools in, is we have an idea of why certain students are picking certain strategies, but that's currently in the churchy context. We have some hypotheses, but we can't really evaluate that any further because everything is based on our current context. So what we're looking at here is saying other schools might use our survey and our metrics and our analysis, and they might go, hey, we're interested in working with churchy school A, school B, school Z, school T, in actually putting together a co-authored publication, whether that be journal article or whatever suits you, presentation at a conference. But also you might start to feed back. And we've already had some really great conversations with other school leaders and teachers in this space, because there's always going to be a gap. And we might be looking down a little rabbit hole, and someone else in this community of practitioners might have the answer. And you say, and you find, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And then by doing that, we can actually refine and then share out again and build this resource where teachers are driving not just the research, but the critical conversations and the dissemination, not being reliant on external experts and paid consultants, but the ability to push in and actually say, this is what we're finding. And then by doing that, we actually, as a collective, have such a better understanding of what's going on. And by doing that, we actually can have these pockets of development and little spot fires of innovation occurring and working in this space, that we can actually have school leaders from different schools, from different contexts, sharing these insights and these pots of gold, we call them, across the board. And by doing that, what we hope to do is to show what schools are capable of. And rather than being at the whim of the external expert telling us what to do or what we should do, by working together, we're more likely to be able to drive real innovation, real classroom-based change that actually impacts every student in every class in the schools. And then by sharing that information out and in an open access and free way, there's no restrictions on what schools can do together. But anyway, so that's sort of where we are. So the next stage is this. From this, we will share this recording and the key details from today out to everyone who registered today. The next stage would be for schools to sign up through their expression of interest if they want to partner with us and go on a bit of a journey together. The big thing is that this journey is into the unknown a little bit. Schools have always been the subject of someone else's research project. Here at Churchy, we've done various research projects with various universities and the Australian Research Council, and often you're moving to someone else's research program. Whereas here we actually have the opportunity as colleagues to actually set the agenda, set the itinerary, and actually move forward as in partnership across schools to do something really interesting and innovative, not restricted by things like funding and resourcing and so forth. So take the time and review the website. We'll send out more information about the website and the plans that we have for it. And when the research portal is ready to go, please consider and discuss with your colleagues at the school. If you want any further information from the website, you can contact either Vicky or myself, and we'd love to get in contact with you. We've already learned so much initially from our initial conversations with many of you who are here today, who have really shaped, even in the short space post our conversation, of where we're heading and what we want to do and how we can partner together. And then from that, we're looking at possibly starting in semester 2 with that cross-sectional analysis of student study behaviours, and then starting to look at, well, what are the things that you're interested in from a school? How can we actually share the load and work together? For example, one of the projects we're looking at is a quick review project, where back when I was a pre-service teacher 20 odd years ago now, down on the south side of Brisbane, I was fortunate enough to have a mentor teacher who taught me the quick review strategy for starting a lesson. And from that one thing, I've carried that through my entire career and have seen a very basic old school way of doing things be actually proved and sort of validated by the cognitive sciences. And what we're looking at doing there is potentially looking at how schools use a simple lesson starter strategy that uses 3 study strategies of retrieval, spacing, and interleaving or jumbling with feedback to do some really nice differentiation. But we're looking at, how do you resource that? How do you resource a simple quick review intervention in, say, year 7 and 8, 9 maths? How do you do that in such a way and resource it so that teachers aren't actually overworking or at the bearer of the actual intervention themselves? They're the sort of projects that we're looking at. The quick review project and the cross-sectional analysis of adolescent study behaviours is something that's really interesting, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we all, in our conversations with our students and their parents, we talk about the need to study, but what we're finding is it's not as easy as we first thought. And by working together, we'll actually get a much greater picture on what we need to do in this space. But anyway, thank you very much for your time today. Please check out the website. We'll be sharing the link. It's live at the moment, learnerstoolkit.com.au. Please have a look at what we've put in there. It will continually be updated moving forward. And we just hope that you take the opportunity to sign up and engage with us, because we're really keen to work with all sorts of different schools and to try to do some big change from the ground up for all students, no matter what school or where they are. So I'll stop recording there. Thank you very much for coming in today. We really appreciate your time. Vicky and I are really thankful for your engagement today. And also, please reach out, and thank you once again.